Welcome everybody to another restorative practice session tonight. The last few weeks we've been talking about karma and seeds and fruits, and then bringing intention to what kind of seeds we plant with our thoughts, words, and deeds to create particular outcomes. And another thing I'd like for us to talk about is the seeds that we plant over and over and over again unintentionally. And so that's what we're talking about tonight. This is called the concept of samskara. And samskaras are often translated as latent impressions. And I think that's kind of vague. So I'm going to explain it a slightly different way, kind of following our metaphor for the last few weeks. Samskaras are like very, very tiny little seeds that get planted over and over and over and over and over again. So much so that even though it's just individual seeds, there's so many of them that it has a large bounty, so we say, a large fruiting or a bigger space in our garden, shall we say. These are things that we've learned from experience, that maybe we've had repeated experiences of over and over again. So therefore, those previous past impressions begin to color or be a lens through which we view our present situation, whether or not it's related. So some of this we do intentionally over and over again. Like some of us have really good dental hygiene, so we brush our teeth twice a day or at least once a day or whatever at a particular time, and we probably do it the same way, and we like a specific kind of toothpaste perhaps. And so we sort of have this ingrained pattern of how we do things. To understand how deeply ingrained your patterns are without being intentional about it, I challenge you to brush your teeth this evening after class with your non-dominant hand, or something like that. Try to find something that you do often and regularly, but in a different way. And you'll see how ingrained your patterns really are. So some of these seeds that we plant kind of fruit as tendencies. They passed as they come to as karmic impulses, sort of repeated patterns of doing and then repeated patterns of the fruits, repeating seeds, repeating fruits. And one thing we could ask ourselves are these regularly repeated things, even if they seem small or insignificant, are these small actions creating karma that is bringing us the type of life that we want to have? Are they helping us toward our goal, or are they pulling us away from our goal? And sometimes we find ourselves in these little obsessive circular whirlpool tornadoes. This has happened to me before. Maybe you've had this happen where you go through a really strong breakup or something like that, and then you're like constantly checking social media. Or I don't know, we have maybe lost the ability to wait in line for more than like 30 seconds without needing to busy our mind with scrolling or reading something. So we have sort of these little tiny things that don't seem like a big deal, but what's happening is they happen so frequently that their karmic echo, shall we say, or the harvesting of that seed is still really large. So that's something to be mindful of. And we want to kind of check in with ourselves. Just like there's no good and bad karma, there's only seed and the fruit that comes from that seed. We can be intentional and mindful, as we talked about last week, about what kinds of seeds we plant. Actually, we can also be mindful of how often we plant seeds. When my daughter was really young, we were very health conscious about the kind of food that we ate. And we would occasionally, bring home a box of Oreos or some kind of sugary snack that we wouldn't normally keep in the house. And we would make sure to tell our daughter, this is a sometimes snack. I didn't want to deny her, the American experience of delicious junk food. It can be really soothing and comforting on some level. But I also didn't want her to make a habit out of it. So what we would do is call it a sometimes snack. And there are some seeds that we plant that we might like to just be like a sometimes seed. Maybe that's not a seed that we want to plant all that particularly often. But it's not necessarily bad to plant it a handful of times in your life or something like that. So thinking about things like that, the more often we engage in certain practices, the deeper the impression is left, or the more often we engage in a particular activity, the more seeds of that we are planting, and therefore the more of those kinds of seeds then will fruit in our lives. So let's get to a really good seed to a restorative yoga practice. This is a wonderful seed to plant over and over again. I'm not sure if this one can be overplanted. I'm to test that theory someday. So what I'd like for us to do is just come into a comfortable resting pose. It might be Shavasana, it might be legs at the wall, perhaps you want to stay seated. But find a place where you can come into stillness and a sense of establishment. I'm reading to you from two sutras from the Yoga Sutras from chapter 4. Sutra 18 says that patterns of consciousness are always known by pure awareness, their ultimate, unchanging witness. So if we want to recognize what these samskaras, these patterns of habitual seed planting are in our lives, if we want to know what those seeds are and be aware of them, we first need to develop that sense of awareness. So coming into that sakshi, witnessing consciousness. Reduce the number of distractions in the body by becoming comfortable. Maybe reduce the amount of distractions in the space around you by closing your eyes and tuning your senses more inward. And notice how in the deepest stillness that you can come to, your heart is still beating, your breath is still flowing, your mind is still alert and moving. See if you can apply the effort of the mind just to watching the breath. Setting for those pulse points of the heartbeat in the wrists or the throat or the chest. And from this place of pure awareness where we're able to now recognize consciousness and recognize those patterns of repeated consciousness, we also want to bring in Sutra 23, 423 here that says, then consciousness can be colored by both awareness and the phenomenal world, thereby fulfilling all its purposes. So what it sounds to me like from this sutra is that we are meant to have this same level of attentiveness and alertness and awareness over our internal self, as well as the changing phenomenon of the world, the swirling of the world around us, always in motion, always changing, always growing, always evolving. To bring that same level of awareness to the inside and the outside is the purpose of consciousness. So let's start to interact between the stillness of the body and the movements of the world and the movements of the breath. So on an inhale, we'll find a cow shape in the body. So the heart lifts, the shoulders come back, the chin rises. Just pause here for a few breath cycles. Feel this shape in the body. Then on an exhale, reverse, chin to chest, shoulders forward. Heart is expanding in the back body now. And again, allow a few breaths to pass. Now let's begin to have a repeated pattern. So as you inhale, find cow with the heart lifted and forward. On your exhale, find cat, chin reduced down to the chest and back body open. So moving forward and up in the heart as you inhale, down and back in the heart as you exhale. This is a motion that we do very often in yoga classes, so this should feel very familiar. We can almost do this without really thinking about it. We inhale, we know when to exhale, we've got this down. We could do this on autopilot, meaning we could do this without much awareness. Next time you come into your cow shape, pause with your heart lifted and your chin lifted. And then exhale here. Inhale, chin to chest, back of the heart gets open. So we're exhaling as the heart shifts up and inhaling into the back body as the heart shifts back. So we're reversing the breath. Now this is not any more challenging a movement than our other way of doing things, but because it's not the way we normally do it, notice if you find yourself slipping back into reversing the breath pattern to a way that makes more sense to you, just because that's the way we normally do it. Come back to your neutral spine, pause, find stillness again. Come back to that observing place. Maybe have a good laugh at yourself and how challenging that last exercise might have been to stay straight. Then we'll find another motion that we do very, very often in yoga practice. And this is, again, an inhale and an exhale motion. So as you inhale, your arms are going to sweep out wide in a big circle and come together above you. They're going to separate from one another and come back down to the floor. Again, we can do this without really thinking about it. There's a natural lift upward in the ribs as we breathe, and as we raise the arms, it exaggerates that motion that's already happening. There's almost an inertia to this movement. The inhale matches the motion of the inside as the outside. And same as we lower our arms on the outside of our body, our ribs are also lowering as we exhale. Next time your hands come up and overhead, take a pause, let a few breaths pass through your body. And feel how this is already breaking the pattern. Now let's try to make it really challenging. So the next time you inhale, bring your arms out wide and away from each other down towards the ground. As you exhale, let your arms rise and lift above your head. Again, same motion. It's not any more physically challenging. It's not heavier or in any way different. But just the reversal of the way we normally do things causes us to stay very aware of the motion that we're doing. Otherwise, we slip right back into our old pattern. So again, we're exhaling as we lift the hands together above the head, inhaling as we bring the hands down towards the floor. Next time your hands come down to the floor, just let your hands for a moment, find stillness again. Just observe, the more blood flow in your arms from kind of flapping the arms up and down. And also now just watching the rise and fall of your ribs as you breathe, even though the arms are no longer in motion. Each seed that we plant through thoughts, words, and deeds also has its echo. Just like a seed becomes larger and larger until it becomes a plant, each one of our actions sort of ripples out or echoes outward. And we can feel that echo of movement in the body. Let's extend the legs long in front of us. You might choose a pranayama bolster or a rolled blanket for underneath your knees, the backs of your knees. And once your legs are extended long in front of you, find that same nice tall seat that we had with our legs crossed. So again, we kind of know this. We know how to move our bodies into this shape. We know how to settle into stillness here. This is a pose that we take relatively often as yoga practitioners and possibly as meditation practitioners. And from here, let's tuck first just the chin into the chest. So nothing else in the body is. Back of the neck is starting to get long. Take several breaths here, and with each exhale, let your head get a little heavier, even though the rest of the body is still not in motion. Then with your next exhale, let the back of the heart broaden open. Let the belly come in towards the spine. Let the shoulders kind of hunch forward. Feel the back of the neck getting even longer now. Several breaths here to allow the weight of the head to continue pulling towards your legs with the front body and up and towards the back of the neck at the back body. From here, we might take grab some support to place on top of your legs, or we might just kind of reach the arms forward and just kind of fold a little bit more deeply over your legs. So feel free to use either a stacked blanket. One of my new favorite things is taking a couple of stacked folded blankets on top of my thighs. And just allowing that to kind of support underneath my ribs and just kind of hanging. You can also support your head like this, or you can take the original version of this pose with bolsters or bed pillows. But we're in this internally gazing shape. Let's just continue to let the body get heavy. And we're bringing the light of that awareness back internally. So we talked about how consciousness, the very purpose of this is to have a highly alert level of awareness and attention, that sakshi, both internally and out in the world. So even as you're focused inward here, see if you can hear any sounds around you. Notice the amount of light or the temperature. See if you can maintain a deep focus both internally and externally from that witnessing place of stillness. Take about 3 to 5 more rounds of breath here. And we'll come out in stages just as we came into the pose. So when you're ready to begin coming out of the shape, first just lift the heart a little away from the thighs. Shoulders are still forward, chin is still to chest. Feel settled in the sitting bones. And then shift your heart upward and backward until it's aligned over your tailbone. Chin is still towards the chest. Shoulders might fall more neutral or a little behind the body now. And finally lift the crown of the head so that it aligns over the heart. Hands might be by your sides or in your lap, and just pause for a moment. Feel that stillness, feel that baseline of awareness. Eyes are closed, feel inward. And for our next shape, we're going to find a back bend. So we are going to come down towards the back. Perhaps whatever you're using on your legs to support your forward might be the ticket for you. But we might also choose a different set of props. We're basically just going to find a back bending shape. I'm going to show this to you from the side so that you can kind of see what prop and how. So I have a couple of blankets. I'm actually going to grab just one more folded blanket. Towels will also work for this purpose. So I have 2 that are about this size folded. And then I'm going to take the top one and make it just a little bit more narrow and place it on top. I might use, again, a rolled blanket or a little cushion underneath the backs of the knees as well. And I'm going to come to lying over the stack of blankets. It's a little less high than a bolster or a stack of bed pillows. Maybe a single bed pillow might be really good here with a blanket rolled in the middle. So my head is resting comfortably on the floor. My shoulders are way up and above the support so that they're aiming downward towards the floor. And basically it's kind of that space between my ribs and the top of my pelvis that's being lifted here. You might adjust your body a little bit on your props because these folded blankets can be a little bit more unpredictable. Maybe it's more comfortable to have more support at the back of the heart. Maybe it would be better a little lower or higher on the ribs. Maybe your sacrum needs a little support as well. So kind of play with it, make it versatile. So I have my legs extended, kind of supported under the backs of the knees, but you could also find another leg position, feet wide, knees together, or opposite, feet together, knees wide, with or without support. And in our last pose, we looked deeply inward. And in this pose, we really want to find more of the openness to new ideas, openness to new ways of doing things. When we do something the same way every single time, we don't really grow. I happen to be one of those people that has a particular order at each restaurant that I go to. Restaurants that I go to regularly, I always order the same thing when off the menu. I have like my favorite thing, and maybe there's two things, but usually it's the same dish every time I go to that restaurant. I am very much a creature of habit. I am certainly not shaming anyone for their samskaras. I build them up regularly. The idea, again, is not that samskaras themselves are bad. It's more the idea of, do we have the discernment? Are we open enough to see things from the outside, to see ourselves from that witnessing place? Can we open up to that self-awareness at a level that allows us to determine and have the discernment to recognize samskaric patterns, which habitual patterns of the mind or habitual patterns of the body are of service to our goal of oneness and unity and healing and peace within? And which of those habitual thought patterns or body mode, whatever it is maybe a distraction or a hindrance from that goal of unity, oneness, wholeness, and inner peace? So it's not like there's a hard and fast set of do's and don'ts, so much as a series of behaviors that we can engage in by determining what frequency of engagement in that activity is helpful, what frequency is not helpful. There's certain things that we don't do enough of that more would be helpful. There's that we do too much of where less would be helpful. So with that open heart, with the head relaxed into that support of the floor, with the shoulders open, maybe even the fingers kind of open and spread a few times, just to kind of let yourself be really open to new ideas. Allow your awareness to just scan your whole heart. Let your consciousness be open and aware of what's happening within you and what's happening around you. Practicing that skill of bringing our awareness to its highest purpose. About 3 more breaths here. Then find your way slowly, patiently, and under the watchful eye of that observing awareness, your way from your back bending shape either to your side and up to seated, or just press your way and carefully back up to seated. We're going to make a little bit of rearrangement. If you are happy with your little blanket stack, we might use it for the next pose as well. If you would prefer a little bit more support for a deer twisting shape, you might grab your pillows or bolster instead. But basically we're going to place that at the back of the mat, or it could be the front of the mat. And finding, first just kind of leaning back into the hands and just letting knees fall side to side. So I'm facing the long edge of my mat right now. You can do that, or just kind of find this motion and then adjust yourself toward your prop leader. But just feel that kind of scanning nature of your knees moving side to side. Where you feel open, where you feel this motion involves both, where we move kind of one knee at a time, back and forth, allowing us to feel really open and then kind of all to one side. Then scoot one of your hips up to the edge of your support, whether it's a stack of blankets or a bolster. And we'll set up our feet for deer twist, first balancing on your hip that's closest to your support. Your opposite might be a little off the ground. Even if the flesh is still touching the ground, just maybe notice where the bones are. And we're going to be really intentional about our movement. So right now we're kind of looking straight away from the prop. And first turn just your head to look in the direction that the prop is pointing. Just kind of first find that. Turn your gaze to look over the opposite shoulder and then back towards the prop. Then start to shift just your heart and shoulders. So your hands might come to support you so you can hold the shape. But staying here upright, looking in this direction, look over one shoulder and then the other. Take another breath here. Notice how your heart turning in that direction might have shifted your hips in some way. Then we can use our support for the torso. You could also use it for your elbows, maybe bringing one arm and then the other onto your support. The shoulder kind of looks like forearms coming down like this, and we could then drop the head in towards the heart. We could also lift it. We might even find a little bit of movement too. Another option would be to let the torso rest on your support, and head can be in either direction. Arms can find relaxation on either side. And once you've found your kind of baseline deer twist here, just notice very little how much movement might be available to you. If you're on your forearms, you might have a little free motion in your head or neck. If your belly is all the way down on your support and maybe one cheek turned to your support, just kind of shift your shoulders left and right. You know, shrug your shoulders up toward your ears and then pull them down toward your hips. Just kind of find where there is a bit of flexibility within this. And so I like this pose because it represents that movement or that motion of our mind, which is in Sanskrit. It also represents the swirling motion of the gunas, which are the three forms of this world. The world itself is also always in motion, constantly churning out new realities moment by moment. And I like how this pose reflects that turning, but also has its stillness. And this is that reminder that we can, through practice, through dedicated practice, we can find our way to a place where we're always in that stillness and witnessing. That allows us to be the observer of both our inner world and the outer. It says here again, Sutra 423, consciousness then can be colored by both awareness and the phenomenal world, thereby fulfilling all its purposes. So when we find stillness in the consciousness, as it says in Sutra 422, when the consciousness is stilled, it comes to resemble that unchanging awareness and then can reflect that it itself is being perceived. So just take a moment here in this stilled, swirling motion and just kind of be aware of your own awareness. Take about 7 to 10 more breaths. No need to count, just sort of be present for the next few cycles of breath. Aware of your own awareness. And when you're in that state, maybe over these last few breaths, you can begin to listen for the pattern of your breathing. Listen for the pattern of your heartbeat. From the stillness, begin to see the patterns. Take another breath or so, and then from whatever deer twist you've taken, begin to work your way very slowly back to a place where you're upright and still twisted toward your bolster or your support, whatever you're using. Turn your head to one shoulder and then the other, maybe a few times. Then shift your gaze and your heart back in the original direction. And just pause here for a moment. Maybe that back knee wants to find a little bit of movement, lifting and lowering. And then finally turn away fully from your support And we'll let, again, the knees just find that side to side motion. So one knee coming down wide to the earth, the other one then following suit, and just moving back and forth, moving one knee at a time, side to side. Feel the difference between openness and sort of being really connected or all on one side. And just allow the knees to be sort of scanning the horizon, looking for patterns. Our minds are actually really programmed very well to look for patterns. Some people are so good at it that they see patterns where there really aren't any. And then other people, most people see patterns. We're good at recognizing number patterns, letter patterns, color patterns, things like that. So we're scanning. Now let's find our way to the deer twist on the other side. So letting that opposite hip come close to your support. Start to set your knees up and kind of looking off to that long side of your mat. Take a moment, let yourself settle into that bottom hip. Maybe the top hip is lifted just a little. And find stillness here. See what you can observe. Leaving your whole torso very still and steady. Turn your gaze to look toward the direction of your bolster or toward the edge of your support. Twist your head around, look over your shoulder for a moment, then come back to the direction of your support. Take another breath or so looking in this new direction. And then begin to turn your heart and shoulders in that direction as well. So your hands will probably need to come down to support you here. We're still kind of staying upright. We might practice by twisting or pressing into one hand into the floor and then the other. Just kind of notice where the movement is available to us here. Maybe it's a little bit of movement, it's a lot. Just feel it. Again, look over each shoulder here. Coming back to looking in the direction our prop is pointing, our support is. And then nice and slow, start to lower your body. Maybe we just bring hands to the bolster or support. Maybe we come down again to forearms, which can be this way or this way. Or perhaps we want to bring the whole torso down onto that support. Again, knees and nose can be facing same or opposite directions. Hands can be relaxed in anywhere that's comfortable. If you are in any way upright and your cheek is not on your support, feel free to take a little bit of movement, chin towards the chest, and then lifting the chin away from the heart, turning the head softly side to side, leaning one ear towards the shoulder and then the other. Notice within this shape what movements are available. Maybe it's just a tiny bit of movement. Maybe it's just a very gentle shift. Feel that swirling energy within of the blood circulating through the body, of the breath flowing in, and then feel the swirling motion that the body is representing of the world moving all around us all the time. And see if wherever that is leading you, see if you can come into the center of your being and watch from that. Watch for the patterns of your breath. Watch for of your heartbeat. Notice which parts of your body are shifting or moving gently with your breath. The more still we become, the more aware we can become, the more clarity we have around that alertness. And the more clarity and alertness we have, the more we are able to identify certain patterns of thinking or patterns of behavior in our lives. These are our samskaras. The more aware we become of these patterns, the more we can use our discernment and wisdom to choose which ones to continue cultivating and which ones to shift or transform. Come into that witnessing place, that observation from a place of wisdom. And just watch the patterns of your breath and your heart for another several rounds of breath here.
And as you feel ready to come out, do so slowly and mindfully, depending on how you've taken this twist. We're going to start to push ourselves up or arrive in that place where we're still facing in the direction of our support with the heart and the gaze. Maybe turning the head again, softly side to side, looking over each shoulder. Maybe into one hand, other, noticing how this shifts the body. Bringing awareness to each tiny little micro and decision that we're making as part of this pose. Then turn the gaze and the heart and shoulders back to that original position where we're looking off to the side, away from support. Balancing on that one hip and just kind of finding that tall, lengthy spine. Pausing, maybe that back knee wants to lift a little bit off the mat. Maybe there's a little gentle bit of twisting in the hips. Then finally turning back away from the support to find that side to side rocking again in the knees. We're going to find our next shape. We have 2 more little movements or variations to take before we find our resting pose. So we're going to do this by coming down to the back. We're going to take some moon bends in the body. So we're going to find that crescent moon shape. You may or may not use any support. I typically just do this kind of flat on my back, but if it's more comfortable for you, have some support underneath your legs and feet, feel free to elevate, especially if you think you'll choose that for your resting pose. Feel free to elevate. And if so, we'll just move the top half of the body. If you're flat on your back, we might choose to move both legs and feet. What everybody's going to do is anchor their sacrum down. So first, coming into that flat back shape. And making sure that the sacrum is deeply rooted. We might kind of just shake out any tension in the body. Just kind of softly allow your body to come into the floor. Heels are either supported by the floor or maybe your support. Arms can be anywhere for these first several breaths. We're just going to take each exhale just like we allowed our head to get heavier and heavier as we looked inward in our first pose. Let's find the body, the whole back body, getting heavier and heavier into the floor or whatever support we're using with each exhale. Feel the sacrum especially becoming very heavy, very anchored into the floor. Find a sense of grounding and steadiness and stability in the sacrum. Then we can choose from here whether or not we'd like to get the bottom half of the body involved in these crescent moon bends. But if it's just the arms, we can maybe reach the arms kind of up and overhead along the floor and move up half of the body. If you're not elevated in the feet, keep your sacrum very rooted to where it is and maybe scoot both feet off to that same direction as your arms and head. So we want to keep the sacrum flat on the floor, so if that means not leaning quite so far to one side, that's okay. And we'll take about 10 or 12 rounds of breath here. Some support that can feel good is just the very edge of a folded blanket kind of underneath your ribs to kind of help you feel a little bit between the sacrum and the ribs. And just come to that observing place. It's very easy to feel the expansion of the inhale when one of the side bodies is opened broadly. Let the next 3 or 4 exhales be ones that help your body to feel more and more heavy and relaxed. Take any effort that you can out of this pose, even if that means backing out of it just a little bit. Get fully soft. No matter the position of your body, the circumstance you may find yourself in mentally or emotionally, can you rely on that anchoring and that steadiness of the sakshi, that witnessing consciousness, to keep you steady even when life is moving around you very quickly? And the reason I've had us keep our spine or the sacrum anchored and the spine is moving is because the sacrum represents for me the body. The chest area representing the heart, the physical heart, and the emotional heart. The head representing the mind or the intellect or the intellectual capacity. And while our mind can dream of the future or remember the past, and our heart may feel things deeply even that are not really present in this moment, the body is always anchored in this moment. So the sacrum stays put. Come back to center, start to align the head and the heart and the sacrum again. If your feet have moved, bring them back to center as well. And take about 4 or 5 breaths to get heavy in the center. Ideally, we are always in the present moment, that our mind is alert and present in the moment, that our heart is alert and responsive to the moment, just as our body is. But we do find these habitual of the mind, habitual patterns of the heart, emotional patterns come so regularly repeated, even if they're small, that they become a part of who we are. They begin to fruit in our lives. So let's move the head and the heart now to the opposite side of your mat. Keep your sacrum anchored. Maybe the feet stay in the center if they're elevated especially, or maybe we move just a little ways in that same direction with the legs and feet. And take the next few breaths to make adjustments so that the spine feels curved and the sacrum feels flat against the floor. Perhaps we move a little bit of support underneath that area between the top of the hip and the bottom of the ribs on our open side of the body. And then watch for the patterns. Stay alert, stay aware. And when we get lost in thought, when we get lost in emotion, a wonderful way to snap us back to alertness and presence is to listen and perceive the breath. Listen to and perceive the heartbeat. The body is always present, and sometimes we can use that map of the breath or the heartbeat to bring us back also into the present moment, to bring the heart and the mind there. So see if even as you're being pulled toward or away from certain patterns in life, see if you can find in this side-bending asymmetrical shape a little bit of peace. Stay rooted in the sacrum, in that sakshi observing consciousness of this present moment that can observe both the mind thinking and the world outside, both of which are swirling. Find your anchor, find your steadiness. And just observe for the next 4 or 5 breaths. When the time is right, follow that trail of your breath and your heartbeat to bring your head and your heart to the center of the mat. Find your alignment again. Feel free to notice any other motions that your body is requesting. Maybe the knees need to come in towards the chest for a moment, or a brief supine twist in either side. Maybe you want to take a gentle bridge pose for just a moment. If you're already for sure ready for Shavasana right in this moment, feel free to head straight into that resting pose. Feel free to utilize any props or support, including a wall, a couch, a bed, anything that will help you to come into that place of total ease and release of energy or movement in the body, and that will take you into that place of alert awareness.
So patterns of consciousness, these samskaras, are always known by pure awareness, their ultimate unchanging witness. This is Sutra 418. 422 says, once the consciousness is stilled, it comes to resemble that unchanging awareness and can reflect itself being perceived. And finally, 423, the consciousness then can be colored by both awareness and the phenomenal world, thereby fulfilling all its purposes. So in order to get to that place, we have to practice again and again and again, even if it's just for 30 seconds at a time. Even tiny seeds, when planted often enough, can become an enormous and bountiful harvest of action. So begin to bring yourself into that stillness and alertness. Begin to watch again for the patterns of breath, the patterns of your heartbeat. And notice how this practice skill will allow you to be also aware of patterns in the mind, patterns of the heart, patterns of behavior. Again and again, we open ourselves, we look inside. Again and again, we change and adapt and evolve in our patterning. Again and again, we are sort of birthed a new being and are able to come to that awareness again, or that aliveness, or that sense of flow. Find your way to that now as you are still. Remain in that stillness of consciousness. Continue to cultivate that witnessing state, your connection to the Sakshi, that witnessing and observing pure awareness. In our stillness, with few distractions in our comfortable body, we find that listening to the sounds, perceiving other kinds of senses like temperature and touch, light, etc. By staying in that state of alert awareness, our ability to be aware of our surroundings is increased and it is more clear. And with that practice, we're better at beginning to observe our own minds, observe our own emotional states, the chitta. We become aware of our own consciousness, the heart mind. And when we are aware both of the external phenomena of the as well as the interior phenomenon of the chitta, of the heart mind, our awareness highlights for us the ability to see the patterns of our lives and to bring discernment to what kind of seeds to plant, how often to plant them, how much space to give, how much water, how much light. We become tenders of the garden of our lives with awareness, with a sense of devotional awareness and love. Take a few more breaths in your stillness and that observation. And then with that consciousness at the very center of your being, with that stillness and awareness within, begin to observe the body coming back into some kind of motion. Maybe it's subtle. Maybe it's slow to come back to motion. Maybe we are kind of ready to come right back into it. So just observe your state of being, your interior state, the exterior state around the body and the mind, and move accordingly. Eventually, over the next minute or so, we'll find our way to an upright seat, but no rushing to get there. Take whatever process and steps you need to arrive. Remaining aware and stillness within, even as the body is moving. So we hold that awareness of the mind. We hold the awareness of the external world, the phenomenon of whirlpool movements of the mind, whirlpool movements of the world. And by bringing palm to palm, we symbolize that bringing together into one practice of consciousness to observe itself and the phenomenal world as one experience of being. Pull that into your heart center, that unity, that pure awareness that is the essence of our being. Tuck the chin to turn our gaze inward there as well, acknowledging our truth. Open your heart to receive wisdom required to see the patterns of our own lives and the patterns of the lives of others. Open yourself to that discernment that helps teach us what is good, what is right, and attention. As we follow this flow of wisdom, as we remain in clarity about our awareness, our life becomes one of service to ourselves and all other living things as one being. And so we close our practice with this prayer. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings be happy, healthy, safe, and free. Namaste.